Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where I'm approaching a very nervous couple of days. While everyone is focusing on the holiday season and preparing for winter, I'm going to be nervously hitting F5 on my browser, along with my army of friends on WhatsApp groups all over the land, and attempting to pick up tickets for the 50th Glastonbury Festival next year. And as usual, I expect 170,000 tickets to disappear in under an hour, and you'll know by my tone on Monday morning if I was successful or not. But for my international listeners, Glastonbury is so much more than a music festival. Try and imagine this big bubble where you can recharge your mojo across 1,000 acres and over 1,000 different music acts are playing, and an incredible eclectic mix of acts too from every music genre you can imagine. But take all that to one side. There's also a green fields there, where there's healers in the healing field, great ideas for responsible and sustainable living in the green futures and permaculture, and also great skills to be learned in the green craft field. Not to mention, you can find a nice bit of peace and quiet in the peace garden. In a nutshell, I put the tech away and can get back to nature while also enjoying great music. So, the reason I've told you all that, sorry to ramble on there, is that I've recently received an email from a company called Data Garden, who have a Kickstarter campaign called PlantWave, and they claim to be the intersection between plants, music, and technology. And man, did that awake the curiosity in my inner aging hippie side. So I invite you to join me on a trip to LA so we can talk with John Shapiro, who's going to tell me all about how to make music from plants using technology. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is John Shapiro. I'm the company director and CTO of Data Garden. And we make, the larger scale of what we do is we convert data into music, real-time data streams into music as a way of monitoring. And we create a lot of software for that. But right now, we are releasing the newest version of our hardware device, which attaches to plants and turns the plant biometrics into music, allowing you to listen to your plants.
Oh, man, I can't tell you how excited I am to get you on the show today, because I'm a rare breed of tech kind of guy where I love the technology, but I also love to just walk away and put the tech down and just reacquaint myself with nature. And I've just returned from a week relaxing in the great outdoors and putting that tech down. But having reacquainted myself with nature while on holiday, your pitch came through at precisely the right moment, because like you said, Data Garden is launching PlantWave, which is a consumer device that allows plants to play music in real time from your phones, tablets and computers. But enough for me getting all excited. I mean, can you set the scene and tell me a little bit more about that intersection of plants, music and technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way to set the scene the best is just to show how this came about. We actually began as a record label back in 2011, and the idea of putting electrodes onto plants to make music came about as it was like a brand activation. I mean, we were always interested in releasing electronic music and getting people out into nature in order to listen to it instead of a bar. And the reason why this caught on, the reason why we're still doing this, is just seeing how not only can plants control synthesizers, that's something we've known since the 70s, but we designed the tech in such a way that we were able to hear the presence of humans around the plants affecting the music that they were making in real time. And this is all, like, you can look in the data and see these spikes in activity happening when certain people would walk into the room. And what that led us to ask questions like, what is it about these people that's having them affect the plant in such a way? And how can we create, an environment where these interactions between human and plant material are amplified through sound? So the short version is, we're measuring what on a human would be a lie detector test, which is galvanic skin response. Plants exhibit that same biometric. And what we're doing is we're looking for subtle variations in the electrical conductivity on the surface of the plant's leaf. And what we can do from that is to map those changes as a wave, which is translated into pitch, and then to map how that wave is changing over time to allow the plant to turn different knobs or even switch between different instruments. So, back to your original question of what is that intersection between plants, music, and technology, what we're able to do is to take these shifts that are happening in the plant that are invisible to the eye, but using biosensing technology, we're able to turn that into data that can control music to allow somebody to hear when there's a shift in the plant. And we then invite people to reflect on, well, what does it mean that the plant just shifted right at that moment as I was experiencing X, Y, and Z? So we've also cultivated a meditation practice around using this technology as well.
And I got a feeling we've got people listening in, I think, over 165 different countries, and they'll be on various backgrounds, but a lot will be listening on their commute to the office and probably setting up right now thinking, whoa, this sounds incredibly interesting, and probably got a few more questions. So can you walk me through how Data Garden's new hardware actually allows people to pair plants to mobile devices, but using Bluetooth, and actually listen to them produce music, but in real time?
Right on. Yeah, so we are really excited to introduce the Bluetooth component. Our current device, we released a device called MIDI Sprout. We did a Kickstarter in 2014, and that was the basic version of this project. It was what we were doing back in 2012. And what happens is the device, so in this case, the PlantWave, will attach to the plant via 2 electrodes. And that's what's measuring the conductivity changes over time. And that is plugged into the PlantWave, where our algorithm is then analyzing the shift in conductivity and assigning those pitch notes that I was mentioning. That is the information that is then Bluetooth to your phone. And on the phone is where the virtual instruments live, which we design to express that data over time. Now, the difference between PlantWave and our older device is before the Bluetooth, we were restricted just to iOS devices because there was no MIDI to USB cable that would work on an Android device. And so I should also say that MIDI is the protocol that we're using to encode the pitch and control messages that are then being mapped to the instruments that we design on the phone. So basically, you put the electrodes on the leaves, plug in our device, that gets sent wirelessly to your phone. And our new app is going to have a variety of different instruments that you can choose from. With the Pro version, you'll be able to design your own sounds. You'll be able to record your sounds and share them with people. So there's a lot of new features that we're really excited about.
And that's all through the PlantWave app. So how does that then turn those biorhythms into music? You just select the instrument. Is that how it works? And it will connect that sound wave to the instrument that you choose, and you can choose a variety of different ones. Is that right?
Yeah, and right, exactly. So there'll be pre-built instruments, and it's not just like you're switching between a piano and a violin. We also code into those virtual instruments different thresholds of activity thresholds. So basically, as the plant is going about its business, photosynthesizing, moving water around, these are all affecting the biometric that we're looking at. So if there's a big shift from, let's say, a short wavelength to a much longer wavelength, that will activate one of those activity thresholds, and you'll be able to hear that expressed through different timbral changes, whether it's like different effects or, switching between some of the different instruments that you selected. So what this allows is for a non-musician, someone can just choose a couple sounds that they like, and then the plant is activating those through time. And in addition to just there being, the piano that's being played, you also hear if there is one of those giant shifts in the wavelength of the plant. And to us, that's the more interesting thing, is what happens when you listen to over a long period of time. And you can hear these marked shifts between, like, when you turned it on, say, in the morning, and then you leave it on through the afternoon when you're having lunch or whatever, and you're noticing, like, oh, wow, this sounds actually completely different than it did this morning.
So I'm curious then, if we have a listener that wanted to go out on a hike and listen to plants that would they encounter along the way, how do they vary? And dare I ask, are some plants better singers or simply more vocal than others out there?
Right. No, it's a great question because, as I said, the instruments are predefined. So it's not like you'll choose a piano and then put it on a cactus and all of a sudden we'll start playing heavy metal. It's nothing like that. But within just that piano sound, absolutely, you hear differences between not only different plants, but even different leaves on the same plant. So, and what are those differences? You might hear, mostly high notes, right? Or you might hear mostly low notes. Maybe one plant will only play a single note at a time, whereas another one you hear like a cascading melody with a lot more effects. This notion of are some better than others, I mean, I'll say that we generally, like when we do an installation or a performance, we're generally working with larger, hardy tropical plants because they are moving a lot of water around. They're very active, so they're affecting that signal that we're looking at pretty significantly. I mean, I definitely also showed up to do a performance and the plant was playing one note. And, the person who booked the show was like looking at me and I'm like, it's not me. That's what the plant's doing. So, you'll find, there are certain plants that'll give you a more reliable, activity level. But once again, the more interesting thing is just hearing how whatever it is the plant is doing is going to vary over time. So even if it's playing one note, that's really interesting for a lot of reasons, and it won't keep doing that forever. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens when it plays that second note or when it becomes a more complex melody.
And I'm conscious we are concentrating a lot on PlantWave, and you've got a big Kickstarter campaign around that at the moment. But I think it's worth highlighting that since 2011, Data Garden has reached thousands of nature enthusiasts and trendy lifestyle hobbyists with its products. So can you tell me a little bit more about the backstory behind Data Garden and actually where it all began?
So it began in Philadelphia, and as I mentioned earlier, as a record label. And not only were we interested in this intersection between electronic music and nature as a way of musical performance, but also the album releases that we did were on plantable seed paper. So there was no consumer waste. You would print the album artwork on paper with seeds embedded in it. Person would download their music and then plant the paper into soil and it would grow into flowers. Around that time in the early days, the Philadelphia Museum of Art invited Data Garden to activate a space in some way, and that's where the idea. Alex Tyson, who was one of the founders, was interested in psychobotany, and Joe PATITUCCI was doing sound design for this idea of creating, the experiments from the 70s, like reviving this plant sentient hardware. And so, in collaboration with Sam Cusimano, who is the engineer on that device, the original Data Garden Quartet was created in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is 4 plants, each one controlling its own instrument in real time. And that was the situation that I alluded to earlier, where certain people would walk into the room. I mean, thousands of people were in and out over the course of the weekend, but it was just a handful of people that would walk into the room that would change the music directly. And I mean, it wasn't even to say that they changed it. When they walked into the room, the music changed, right? Yeah. And, talking to those people, it came out that they were Reiki practitioners or meditators or botanists, like people that were really in tune with plants. And that was this light bulb moment of, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just like a gimmicky, cool thing. This is like tapping into this deep connection that a lot of people have, but I would say most people have, with the natural world, and giving a technological face to it, like using technology as the bridge to get into that domain. So, at that point, Data Garden is still a record label. There's this really cool installation that's touring, and people are really into the plant music thing. But it kind of became clear that people were more interested in listening to plants than they were the bands on our label. So that was the original impetus for the first Kickstarter in 2014, which was like, let's make a product out of this. Let's just take, these electronics and put them in an enclosure and allow people to recreate this experience at home. And yeah, and ever since then, that's it's just been about making that experience easier for people to access. And that was the impetus for us to then create the app, which has those pre-built sounds that I was mentioning before. Before the app, you had to be some sort of a MIDI sound design guru in some way. You had to really know your way around a digital audio workstation to make something compelling. But by that point, the yoga community, the Reiki community, they were like, oh, I get this. I want to use this in my classes. I want to use this at home. How can I just plug my plant into my phone and listen to it?
And like we've already mentioned, PlantWave isn't your first Kickstarter. So I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit more about your previous experiences with Kickstarter and also any lessons that you learned along the way that you were going to put right this time around? Because I think there might have a few people listening that are also thinking about going on Kickstarter, because it's not as simple as just uploading a video and a page and away you go, is it? There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes before you even hit launch.
Yeah, I mean, it's a full-time job. It's just, it's managing a campaign, it's creating tons of content, it's communicating with your backers. And I mean, as much as it is completely insane, it's also a lot of fun. The lessons that we learned. So also before we even did the Kickstarter for MIDI Sprout, some of those outdoor festivals, we did a Kickstarter for that as well. So that was kind of getting the lay of the land on how crowdsourcing works. Then the one in 2014 is most akin to what we're doing now, because it's a hardware device. And yeah, I mean, we learned tons and tons about, beyond even just like project management, just what it takes to create a hardware product from nothing when you have a community of people that have already pledged. So you need to keep them involved with everything that's happening. We ended up taking a lot longer to deliver than we thought we would. And so we delivered MIDI Sprout in 2016. And honestly, the biggest hang up there, the thing that took the most time, was just finding the right enclosure. Some of our plans for an injection mold didn't pan out the way we thought they would, and that's incredibly expensive. An amazing lesson was as we're communicating this to our backers, there were a couple that were growing impatient, but most people were fascinated to get, behind the scenes look of how you would create such a weird, crazy device that, there's very few other pieces of technology that do this thing. And we opened it up to our community. We said hey, our plans for the enclosure didn't pan out. What do you guys think? And someone came forward and was like, why don't you make it out of cardboard? The Google Glass had not the Google Glass, the Google VR headset, that had just come out, and that was made out of cardboard. So it was kind of this thing of oh, Google's doing that. It's a totally legitimate thing, right? So one of our users came forward, is I will make your enclosure for you out of cardboard because it's going to be super simple, and it totally saved the day. And I'm happy to report that since then, we've upgraded the enclosure of the MIDI Sprout to be a 3D printed, biodegradable, non-GMO corn and cork enclosure. But yeah, I mean, but it's just so doing all the fun events and promotion, getting to talk to people such as yourself as we're doing this outreach for the campaign, and then working with our community and keeping them updated and taking them along for the ride. That's really helped inform how we're doing the Kickstarter this time. But then also, to your point, it's not just uploading a video. You got to really plan everything out.
And of course, at the time of recording, you've already picked up a significant amount of funding. You've blasted past the halfway mark with relatively quickly. So can you tell me more about the options available for anyone that might want to drop by and check out and find out more information about what you're doing here?
Yes, there was a great response right off the bat. So we had some of the reward tiers are already gone, but what remains are the actual PlantWave device itself, at a reduced rate, which is super cool. And there's also the option to be a product tester, which is becoming increasingly popular. That's going to be a higher reward price because we're actually going to make those as soon as the campaign closes. So it'll be a smaller batch, so it'll be more expensive. But to the point that, just came up before, is this is an opportunity for you to get an early version of this, to test it out, to give us your feedback. So much of the new features of PlantWave come from the user feedback we've received over the years. So we really technology isn't just made by a single person. Like it's absolutely about how is this going to impact people's lives and how would people want to use it. So the opportunity to be a product tester is in there, which is super cool. There are other bundles, basically just discounts on multiple units. One of the really cool features of the new app is you'll be able to recreate that quartet experience. A lot of people say, hey, like, can I hook up all the plants in my living room? Before, the answer was, well, yes, you could, but there's like no software that exists that will make that easy for you. You have to, like, when we do an installation, we have to like use a bunch of third-party software that isn't really supposed to talk to each other and somehow get it to talk to each other. We're taking care of all that in the new app. And I should also mention that the app itself, the basic functionality is free. So there's no paywall for getting your plants to make music, but there are going to be additional subscription models that come with more advanced features. And one of those features is the advanced MIDI routing on the back end, so that you could wire up multiple plants. You could have all of the plants in your living room playing their own instrument or in your greenhouse. So that's coming in the app. Those bundles are available. We are also offering the ability for us to come to you and to make a durational installation. There's currently some international folks that we're talking to they're just asking some questions to make sure that we'll be able to successfully do it in their space. And the answer is yes. So I'm really looking forward to getting to do those. It's going to be really, really fun. And then in addition to that, we're about to unveil some more travel experiences. There are people that we work with around the world that are working with plants in various capacities that are going to open their space for people to come and to learn and to listen and work and just get away from home. So we're going to start unveiling those next week, I believe.
And what's your grand vision for PlantWave and indeed Data Garden Quartet there? Because I attend the Glastonbury Festival every year. There's a great area in there called the Greenfields, and something like this would just be a huge, huge hit there. So, but what are your plans for the future?
No, that's awesome. If you wanted to tell the right person about that and they could invite us, we would love to do that. That would be great. I mean, with the quartet, like we did the TED 2019 conference this year. We did this installation in Tulum. And so we really love touring that piece. So definitely continuing to do that. The grander vision for Data Garden would be to, we are a software company. The software that we're developing that we're really excited about is the different ways that you can process real-time data into music. So think about human wearables or the stock market. Just as we're moving away from the visual dashboard and into the AirPod generation, there's going to be so many interesting opportunities for data sonification to be a part of everyday life. So the reason why we're making this hardware essentially is because you can't get a high enough resolution of heart data, say, from the Apple Watch. But plants are really complex organisms, and their biometrics, the electrical conductivity on their leaves, is changing so much over the course of a single second. So as much as this project is about just opening up people's awareness to that fact of plants being really complex beings, it's also an opportunity for us to develop these software tools, which we can then apply to other data inputs, which is something we're already doing. We're licensing the sound engine out to some wearable companies that are specifically doing heart rate variability. And so we're really excited to continue to do that. And we definitely see a future where within the next few years, where that type of data resolution from human biometrics will just be readily available. People will have that as part of their lives, and we'll be able to offer this really awesome opportunity to interface with it in a new way, specifically through sound.
So if anybody listening wanted to find out more information about everything that you're doing and what you stand for at Data Garden, or equally if they want to check out everything that you're doing on your Kickstarter page with PlantWave, what's the best way of doing that? And equally, if there's anybody that wants to ask you a question or your team a question, can you just point them in the direction of how to do that too?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the Kickstarter is live at plantwave.com, and that has everything you'll want to know about PlantWave. It does have links to other resources. That would definitely be the first stop. And datagarden.org is the umbrella organization, and it's very easy to shoot us an email through there. I also would recommend checking out PlantWave on Instagram. The handle is just PlantWave, one word, because there you can see a lot of the videos that our users have made over the last 5 years of working with our technology. We repost a lot of them, and we are continually blown away by how innovative people are with this one tool, using it in like different ways than we had thought, and creating some really cool video to show for it.
Well, at the end of every episode, I always say that technology works best when it brings people together. But what you're doing is using technology to bring nature and people together, which has got to be a fantastic thing. I also love how you're actually being that intersection between plants, music, and technology. So I wish you the best of luck for the future. Hopefully see you at Glastonbury next year in the green fields.
Yeah.
If not, best of luck for the future. And thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a blast.
Wow, one of the secrets of innovation is always be curious. And this one really struck a chord with me for that very reason, and it's an incredibly cool concept. So I will add links to the blog post over at techblogwriter.co.uk/datagarden, and hopefully you'll be able to see exactly what I mean. And in other news, if I secure my Glastonbury tickets, I might even email the guys at the Greenfields over at Glastonbury and tell them the only headline act that they need to book next year is the Plant Quartet. But more on that story later. So, as always, I want to hear your thoughts on today's episode on the intersection between plants, music and technology. And you can do that by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. And if you've got anything you'd like to share, there's always an open invite for you to come on here too. But it's time for me to go now and kick back and listen to some tunes and think about a future where plants might be able to create sweet music and I'm not going crazy. That sounds like my kind of world. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.